I'll be showing you how I built this walnut office desk or table, whatever you want to call it. Starting with the base, I chose a pine plywood. Tools that you'll need: liquid nails, nail gun, and an air compressor. Table is 1.5 inches thick once I get the walnut on top, and it's good enough because it won't bend in the middle when it's all complete. Worst case scenario, I'll put a support beam in the back. I got my walnut from a local flooring warehouse, and I chose a lower grade wood so I can have some holes in them to fill with putty later for contrast. Make sure you leave wood hanging so you can cut a straight line once installed. And for the first line, double check that the boards are super straight, since this matters a lot for the rest of the table. Once you got your boards picked out and everything seems right, get your liquid nails ready. Starting with the liquid nails, you want to do a generous amount on there. Don't be shy with it. This is your first line. It's going to hold all of the other pieces into place as well. And make sure it's super straight. Now right here is a very crucial step. You got to line up the board very carefully and super straight to the plywood. Once that's ready, hold it in place and nail it down. I ran into a small issue right here where the board got off-centered, but it's an easy fix. I'll just hit it with the hammer and nail it down a couple more times. I had this board right here that split like this. I didn't want it to go to waste, so I got some wood glue. I'm gonna put a generous amount on there and hold it down, and it'll dry up within an hour and be like brand new. I had a couple trouble spots on the table, but it's not that it's not fixable. Right here, the board wouldn't lock in. I'll just putty that up. And right here, that's where I'm gonna cut my line with a skill saw. Same thing on this end. And right here, I gotta cut a bit. Now you wanna get your putty and putty as much of it as possible. You don't want any cracks or holes left. After letting that dry overnight, I came back in the morning, and right here, I'm putting my chalk line at the exact measurements that I need to cut with the skill saw. After marking all my lines around the table, I'm ready to cut. Now I got a pretty much perfect straight line that I'll sand out to make it even better, but as you can see, nice and straight, nothing poking out, and easy to sand. Now I'm using a white oak plank to do my border of the table. I'm only doing the face walls, meaning only where I'll be sitting and the end that'll be visible. I'm not doing the back or any side that will be against the wall. After measuring what I need, I cut it down with a table saw. Now make sure everything aligns, and then you could go ahead and nail everything in and make sure everything is lined up. Now here comes the fun part, sanding this bad boy down. I'm using a edger floor sander. I know a lot of you might not have this, but you could rent it at Home Depot or Lowe's, or just use a orbital sander. That will take a lot longer, but you use what you can. Moving on, what grit paper to use. Starting off with a 36, then moving to an 80 grit. You want to finish off with something above an 80 to make it easier and nicer finish. Starting with the 36, I'm going side to side to smooth everything out and make sure I have a flat finish. I do a couple passes of this until I'm satisfied with the level of the table. After the 36, I'm gonna go back and putty up holes that have opened up or just need some attention. While I'm waiting for the putty to dry, I'm gonna use a 5-inch orbital sander to hit the sides and round off the edges. I'm using a 60 grit on it. With this whole process, I'm just eyeballing it on the corners and the rounding. You want to feel what is comfortable for you, and I like a more rounded off edge, and as you can see, I'm working it in and just eyeballing it and going with what I like. Now moving over to an 80 grit on the edger. Instead of moving side to side, I'm gonna go front and back and smooth out any areas that are troubled. Now get your 6-inch orbital sander and get an 80 grit on there and start going to town on it. Smooth everything out, get rid of the deep scratches from the edger. I got the 5-inch orbital sander one more time just to touch everything up. Now, as you can see, everything is nice and smooth, no ridges, and here I'm showing you the spots where I filled in with a lot of putty and it's all nice and dry and not loose. Now for the back end. When you flip over your table, you want to get a 40 grit on your 6-inch orbital sander and just quickly give it a rough sand. Once you're done sanding, you could dust it off. I use the broom, you could use whatever you want, vacuum, damp rag, anything will work. Now it's time to seal the back. I'm using a water-based polyurethane Loba Easy Finish. The way I apply this is I just pour it out onto the table, spread it out equally, and go section by section. Water-based poly dries up real quick, and it's been about 2 minutes and it's already pretty much dry, but I'm gonna give it about 10 minutes before I hit it with a screen, and I'm using 150 grit here. If it's really rough, I don't recommend going any lower, but if it's nice and smooth, you can use a 220. Now applying the second coat after I dusted it off, do the same thing, and you're gonna need to put a little less because the wood has already absorbed from the first coat and you won't need as much. Now just repeat that process of buffing and adding coats until it's nice and smooth or to your liking. I did 3 coats. Now time for the fun part, and we're almost done. Time to seal it with some polyurethane. I'm using Masterline semi-gloss. I don't recommend doing a satin unless that's what you're into, but for a tabletop I really like a semi-gloss or gloss. I'm applying it with a roller. You want to make sure you spread it out evenly, and if you're worried that the roller will leave bubbles, it will not, depending on what roller you use, but try to get one with less nappiness. But oil base for the most part will not leave bubbles with the roller. Now the table looks beautiful with this coat on. It's going to take 24 hours to dry, and then you could apply your next 2 coats. This is what the finished product will look like. It's real nice and smooth. This is the complete desk setup. Everything went great, no issues.